The impossible mission. The galaxy was full of dangerous planets, but none as deadly as Sirian. To most species, it was a cursed world, a place where the very ground seemed to reject life. The sky burned with toxic gases, the winds howled like banshees, and the storms could tear through metal as if it were paper. No one survived there. The Zephyrians, the planet's dominant species, ruled not because they were the most intelligent, but because they were the only ones who could withstand the brutal environment. For centuries, they had watched other species attempt to colonize Sirian, only to watch them die within days, sometimes hours. To the Zephyrians, Sirian wasn't just their home. It was a fortress, an unbreakable barrier that kept the rest of the galaxy at bay. So when they heard that humans were the next to try, the Zephyrians laughed. Humans were weak, fragile creatures from a soft, green planet called Earth. They had no natural armor, no claws, no fangs. The idea that they could survive even a single night on Sirian was absurd. The Zephyrians placed bets on how long it would take for the humans to perish. Some said 3 days, others said less. None believed they'd last a week. But humans had a strange reputation in the galaxy. They were new to interstellar travel, yet stories about them spread like wildfire. Tales of their stubbornness, their ability to adapt, and their refusal to quit even when all hope was lost. Still, the Zephyrians thought, no amount of stubbornness could save them from Sirian. The planet itself would crush their spirit. When the human ship finally descended onto Sirian, the Zephyrians watched from their hidden outposts, curious and amused. The ship, a bulky, rugged vessel named the Horizon, touched down in one of the planet's deadliest regions, an area known as the Blight Plains, infamous for its acid storms and predatory creatures. The Zephyrians chuckled. The humans had chosen the worst possible place to land. Fools, they thought. Inside the Horizon, Captain Alex Carter stood with his crew, staring at the bleak landscape through the reinforced windows. The air outside shimmered with toxic fumes, and jagged rocks jutted from the ground like the teeth of some monstrous beast. The sky was a sickly green, swirling with dark clouds that crackled with electricity. Alex could feel the tension in the room. His crew, scientists, engineers, soldiers, knew the odds. They had read the reports, seen the footage of previous failed expeditions, but Alex also saw something else in their eyes. Determination. He turned to his team, his voice steady. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy," he said, "but we're not here to survive. We're here to thrive. This planet thinks it can beat us. Let's prove it wrong." With those words, the crew sprang into action. They donned their environmental suits, designed to withstand extreme conditions, and stepped out into the hostile world. The Zephyrians watched eagerly, waiting for the humans to collapse from the toxic air or be torn apart by the planet's monstrous wildlife. But the humans didn't fall. They didn't falter. They began to work. The first challenge came within hours. A sudden acid storm rolled in from the horizon, faster and more violent than anything the humans had encountered before. The Zephyrians grinned, expecting the flimsy human shelters to melt away under the corrosive rain. But Alex and his team had anticipated this. Using materials from their ship and scavenged minerals from the planet itself, they constructed temporary shields that deflected the acid. When the storm passed, the Zephyrians were shocked to see the human camp still standing. But that was only the beginning. At night, the Vorlax came, massive, six-legged predators with armored hides and razor-sharp claws. They were the apex predators of Sirian, feared even by the Zephyrians. No alien species had ever survived a Vorlax attack. But humans were different. They didn't just fight back. They adapted. Using motion sensors and traps, they turned the predator's instincts against them. Within days, the humans had captured a Vorlax, not to kill it, but to study it. They learned how it moved, how it hunted, and even how its armor resisted the planet's acid rains. Soon, The humans were using this knowledge to reinforce their own gear. The Zephyrians watched in disbelief. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The planet was supposed to break the humans, but instead, the humans were bending the planet to their will. Weeks passed, and the humans didn't just survive. They started to build. They created greenhouses that filtered the toxic air and grew crops in the planet's poisoned soil. They'd mined Sirian's dangerous minerals, turning them into tools and weapons. They even began to explore the planet's deadliest regions, mapping areas that no Zephyrian had ever dared to enter. The Zephyrians grew uneasy. They had underestimated the humans. These weren't the fragile creatures they had expected. There was something different about them, something that the Zephyrians couldn't understand. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics. It was their spirit. No matter how harsh the environment, no matter how deadly the threat, the humans refused to give up. But the Zephyrians weren't ready to accept this. They believed that the humans had just been lucky so far. They decided to take matters into their own hands. If the planet couldn't kill the humans, then they would. As the sun set on another day, Captain Alex Carter stood outside the horizon, looking over the thriving camp. The planet had thrown everything it had at them: storms, predators, poisoned air, and still, they stood strong. But Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that the real challenge was yet to come. The planet was brutal, but it was predictable. The Zephyrians, however, were something else entirely. In the shadows, Zephyrian scouts crept closer, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They had orders: sabotage the human camp, make it look like an accident. But they didn't know that humans had a habit of turning every challenge into an opportunity. The humans weren't just surviving Sirian. They were about to show the galaxy what it meant to thrive. The first challenge. The planet was restless. Sirian didn't take kindly to invaders, and though the humans had survived longer than anyone expected, the world wasn't done testing them. The Zephyrians, hidden in the shadows, watched with growing unease. Days had turned into weeks, and the humans were still alive. Not just alive, thriving. Their camp had grown from a fragile outpost to a fortified settlement, with greenhouses blooming under protective domes and towering mineral walls, shielding them from the worst of the planet's wrath. But Sirian had more in store, and the humans were about to face their first true challenge. It began with a sound, a low, distant rumble that vibrated through the ground like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Captain Alex Carter felt it before he heard it, a subtle tremor beneath his boots as he stood surveying the camp. The horizon darkened, not from the usual acidic clouds, but from something denser, heavier. The air grew thick, the winds shifted, and an unnatural silence fell over the landscape. The Zephyrians knew this sign well. It was the storm of blades, one of Sirian's deadliest phenomena. Hurricane-force winds carrying razor-sharp shards of crystalline rock that could shred metal and flesh alike. Inside the human camp, alarms blared as sensors detected the incoming storm. The crew scrambled into action, sealing off vulnerable structures and reinforcing barriers. But the storm of blades was faster than anything they'd faced before. Within minutes, the first wave hit. The winds howled like a living creature, and the shards rained down, slicing through the outer layers of their defenses. The Zephyrians, watching from afar, smiled grimly. No one survived the storm of blades. But the humans were not like the others. Inside the main control center, Alex barked orders, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. Activate the magnetic shields. Redirect power from non-essential systems. His crew moved with precision, their faces tense but determined. They had prepared for storms, but nothing like this. The magnetic shields flickered to life, creating an invisible barrier that deflected the smaller shards, but the larger ones still tore through the outer walls, sending showers of sparks and debris into the air. In the midst of the storm, a sharp alarm pierced through the control center. Breach detected. One of the greenhouses had been hit, and the toxic atmosphere was flooding in. Without hesitation, Alex grabbed his gear and led a team into the heart of the storm. The Zephyrians, observing through hidden drones, watched in disbelief as the humans fought not just to survive, but to protect what they had built. The storm raged for hours, testing every ounce of human endurance and ingenuity. They patched holes with emergency sealants, reinforced walls with scavenged materials, and used portable shield generators to create safe zones. When the storm finally passed, the camp was battered but still standing. The Zephyrians were stunned. No species had ever withstood the storm of blades. Yet here the humans were, bloody but unbroken. But Xerion wasn't done. As the crew worked to repair the damage, another threat lurked in the shadows. The Vorlax, massive six-legged predators native to Xerion, had been drawn to the camp by the storm's aftermath. These creatures were the undisputed kings of Xerion's food chain, armored beasts with claws sharp enough to rip through steel and a predatory intelligence that made them even more dangerous. The Zephyrians had always avoided Vorlax, knowing that even their advanced weapons were barely enough to fend them off. The first Vorlax appeared at the edge of the camp just as the humans were catching their breath. It moved with terrifying speed, its dark, chitinous body blending into the rocky terrain. Alex spotted it immediately and raised the alarm. "We've got company." The humans scrambled once more, grabbing weapons and taking defensive positions. But the Vorlax were unlike anything they had faced before. The first creature tore through the outer defenses as if they were paper, its claws slicing through metal beams and sending debris flying. The humans opened fire, but their standard weapons barely made a dent in the creature's thick armor. More Vorlax emerged from the shadows, their glowing eyes reflecting the camp's flickering lights. The Zephyrians watched with bated breath, certain that this would be the end of the humans. But what they didn't expect was the humans' ability to adapt. Alex quickly realized that conventional tactics wouldn't work. "Aim for the joints," he shouted, spotting a weak point where the creature's armor plates overlapped. The crew adjusted their fire, targeting the vulnerable spots with precision. Meanwhile, the engineers worked frantically to modify their weapons, using materials scavenged from the planet to create high-frequency pulse rounds that could penetrate the Vorlax armor. But it wasn't just their weapons that gave the humans an edge. It was their ability to think under pressure. They used the environment to their advantage, luring the Vorlax into traps set among the debris from the storm. One team rigged a section of collapsed wall with explosives, waiting until a Vorlax was directly beneath it before triggering the blast. Another team used the camp's power grid to electrify a perimeter fence, stunning the creatures long enough to deliver a killing blow. The battle raged through the night, a brutal test of endurance and ingenuity. By dawn, the ground was littered with the bodies of Vorlax, and the human camp, though damaged, still stood. The Zephyrians were silent. They had seen species fight before, but never like this. Humans didn't just react. They innovated. They didn't just survive. They adapted. And in doing so, they turned Xerion's greatest threats into tools for their survival. In the aftermath of the attack, Alex and his team didn't rest. They studied the Vorlax bodies, analyzing their biology and armor. They discovered that the creature's chitinous exoskeletons were resistant to the planet's acid rains and incredibly durable. Instead of fearing the Vorlax, the humans began to harvest their armor, incorporating it into their own protective gear and fortifications. Within days, the camp's defenses were stronger than ever, reinforced with the very materials that had once threatened their lives. The Zephyrians, watching from their hidden outposts, were no longer amused. Fear began to creep into their hearts. Xerion had thrown its worst at the humans, and instead of breaking, they had grown stronger. The planet itself seemed to bend to their will, but the Zephyrians weren't ready to give up. They believed there was still a way to drive the humans out. If the planet couldn't kill them, perhaps sabotage could. As night fell once more on the battered but thriving human camp, the Zephyrians made their move. In the dark, unseen by human eyes, Zephyrian saboteurs crept toward the camp, armed with devices designed to disable power systems and contaminate water supplies. They were confident in their plan. After all, no species had ever stood against them for long. But the Zephyrians didn't understand what they were up against. The humans had faced the planet's fury and the planet's monsters. Now, they were about to face the humans themselves. And humans were the deadliest force of all. The hidden enemy. The dawn on Sirion was a strange, eerie thing. The sky blurred shades of green and orange as the toxic clouds shifted, and the sun struggled to pierce through the thick atmosphere. For Captain Alex Carter and his crew, dawn usually brought a brief sense of relief, a moment when they could breathe easier, knowing they had survived another night on the galaxy's most hostile planet. But this dawn felt different. The air was heavier, not just with toxins, but with something more sinister. The camp, now fortified with Vorlak armor and reinforced barriers, stood like a defiant scar on Sirion's surface. The humans had survived acid storms, battled monstrous predators, and adapted to conditions no other species could endure. Yet, despite their growing strength, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The planet itself had become a known adversary. But this was different. This was deliberate, calculated. It didn't take long for the first signs to appear. The camp's power grid flickered without warning, causing life support systems to stutter. The crew rushed to investigate, expecting mechanical failure or environmental interference. But what they found was far more troubling. Wires had been cut, not corroded or damaged by the storms, but cleanly sliced with surgical precision. It wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. Alex called an emergency meeting in the control center. His team gathered around the central holo display. Faces were tense, eyes sharp. They had prepared for everything Sirion could throw at them, but they hadn't expected an intelligent enemy working against them in the shadows. "We've got company," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "Not the kind that roars and claws, the kind that thinks." The implications were clear. The Zephyrians, the planet's native species, were no longer content to let the planet do their dirty work. They had been watching the humans, learning their routines, waiting for the right moment to strike. The crew had heard of the Zephyrians before. Tall, sleek creatures with bioluminescent skin and cold, calculating minds. They had ruled Sirion for centuries, using the planet's dangers as a natural defense. But now, for the first time in their history, they felt threatened. Over the next few days, the sabotage escalated. Water supplies were contaminated with toxins more potent than anything the planet could produce naturally. Equipment vanished in the night, only to be found later, smashed to pieces or rendered useless. Even the Vorlaks seemed to be avoiding the camp, as if the Zephyrians had found a way to influence the planet's deadly wildlife. But humans were nothing if not adaptable. Alex and his team didn't panic. Instead, they got creative. They set traps around the camp, silent alarms, motion sensors, and hidden cameras rigged from scavenged materials. They worked in shifts, ensuring that the camp was never unguarded, even for a second. The crew, already hardened by their time on Sirion, grew more vigilant, more determined. Every act of sabotage was met with a new countermeasure, every attack a lesson in resilience. Then, one night, they'd finally caught a break. The sensors triggered at 3:47, a faint blip on the perimeter just outside the main greenhouse. Alex and a small team moved swiftly, silent as shadows, their weapons at the ready. They expected to find a creature, maybe a Vorlak straying too close. But what they saw made their blood run cold. It was a Zephyrian. The creature was tall and slender, its skin a faint glowing blue that pulsed with an otherworldly light. It moved with grace, its long fingers deftly working to sabotage the greenhouse's filtration system. For a moment, the humans watched in stunned silence. This was the first time they had seen a Zephyrian up close, and the sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying. But Alex wasn't one to hesitate. "Now," he whispered, and his team sprang into action. The Zephyrian reacted with lightning speed, but it wasn't fast enough. The humans surrounded it, weapons trained on its chest. The creature hissed, a sound that was both a warning and a threat. But Alex didn't flinch. "You've got two choices," Alex said, his voice steady. "Talk, or we find out how tough that glowing skin of yours really is." To their surprise, the Zephyrian spoke. Its voice was low, melodic, but filled with venom. "You do not belong here, human," it said. "This world will kill you if we don't do it first." But Alex wasn't intimidated. "Funny," he replied, "because it looks like we're doing just fine." They brought the Zephyrian back to the camp, securing it in one of the reinforced storage units, turned makeshift holding cell. The crew gathered around, eager for answers. But the creature offered little information, only repeating the same warning: leave or die. But humans weren't the kind to back down from a challenge. While the crew interrogated the Zephyrian, Alex and his chief engineer, Dr. Elena Reyes, began analyzing the sabotage patterns. They noticed something curious. The attacks were precise, targeting key systems that only someone with an understanding of human technology could identify. This wasn't random aggression. It was strategic warfare. Elena discovered traces of alien nanotech in the sabotaged systems, tiny, self-replicating machines that had been subtly disabling their equipment from the inside out. The technology was far beyond anything the Zephyrians should have been capable of. It raised a disturbing question. Were the Zephyrians getting help from somewhere else? As the days passed, tensions grew. The crew knew they couldn't survive a prolonged war of attrition. They needed to turn the tables. Alex devised a bold plan, not just to defend their camp, but to strike back. They would use the captured Zephyrian as bait. Under the cover of night, they released the prisoner, but not without a tracker embedded beneath its skin. The creature, believing it had escaped, fled into the wilderness, unaware that the humans were following its every move. For hours, they tracked the Zephyrian through the harsh terrain, navigating acid pools and jagged cliffs until it led them to something unexpected. A hidden Zephyrian outpost built into the side of a rocky canyon. The outpost was a hive of activity. Dozens of Zephyrians moved in and out, carrying strange equipment and materials. But what caught Alex's attention was the centerpiece of the outpost, a massive alien artifact, pulsing with energy. It was unlike anything the humans or Zephyrians had created, a relic from a civilization far older and more advanced. Alex realized with a sinking feeling that the Zephyrians weren't acting alone. They had discovered something powerful, something that could shift the balance in their favor. But humans didn't run from threats. They faced them head-on. Alex returned to the camp with a new mission. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to uncover the truth behind Syrian secrets. The planet wasn't just hostile by nature, it was being weaponized. And if the Zephyrians thought they could outsmart humanity, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The turning point. The discovery of the Zephyrian outpost changed everything. Until now, the humans had treated Syrian as a hostile environment, an unforgiving planet with storms, predators, and dangers that could be predicted and, with enough ingenuity, overcome. But this was something different. This was intelligent resistance, a deliberate effort to push humanity off the planet. The Zephyrians were more than just the planet's inhabitants. They were strategic, organized, and now, it seemed, desperate. Captain Alex Carter stood in the command center, staring at the holographic map displaying the location of the Zephyrian outpost. The alien artifact at the center of their operation pulsed in his mind like a ticking time bomb. It was clear now. The Zephyrians weren't just sabotaging them out of fear or hatred. They had discovered something ancient, something powerful, and they were willing to do anything to protect it. But Alex knew humanity wasn't here to back down. They had come to thrive, and nothing, not the planet, not the storms, and certainly not the Zephyrians, was going to stop them. The plan was risky, maybe even reckless, but there was no other choice. They couldn't wait for another sabotage attempt. They had to strike first. Alex gathered his team in the central hub, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of the control panels. Dr. Elena Reyes, the chief engineer, laid out the tactical details, while Sergeant Marcus Hale, their head of security, checked the weaponry. The crew had been hardened by weeks of constant threats, but this mission was different. They weren't defending their camp anymore. They were taking the fight to the enemy. "We've survived everything this planet has thrown at us," Alex began, his voice steady but intense. "But survival isn't enough. They think they can scare us off, but they don't know who we are. We're human. We don't quit. We don't back down. We adapt, we fight, and we win." The room was silent for a moment. Then Marcus grinned. "Let's show them what thriving looks like." Under the cover of the planet's perpetual twilight, the team set out, moving swiftly and silently across the rugged terrain. The Vorlek armor they had integrated into their suits made them nearly impervious to the acidic winds, and their modified weapons, using Zypherian tech they had reverse-engineered, gave them an edge they desperately needed. As they approached the canyon where the Zypherian outpost was hidden, Alex signaled for the team to halt. From their vantage point, they could see the outpost buzzing with activity. The artifact at its center glowed brighter now, casting eerie shadows across the rocky landscape. It was clear that the Zypherians were preparing for something big, something catastrophic. Alex whispered into his comm, "Phase 1. Disable their power grid. Rise. You're up." Elena moved like a ghost, her small frame slipping through the shadows as she approached the outpost's perimeter. The Zypherians had sophisticated defenses, but Elena had spent weeks studying their technology. She found a weak point in their energy network and planted an EMP charge. With a soft click, the device armed, and she retreated to the team's position. "Ready when you are, Captain," her voice crackled through the comm. Alex took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the glowing artifact in the center of the camp. "Do it." The EMP exploded in a silent burst of light, and the outpost plunged into chaos. Lights flickered and died, machinery ground to a halt, and the Zypherian warriors scrambled in confusion. The humans moved in, striking with precision and efficiency. Their weapons, modified to counter Zypherian armor, cut through the enemy ranks like a hot knife through butter. But the Zypherians were fierce. They fought back with everything they had. Energy weapons that crackled with alien power, bladed staffs that hissed through the air, and their own natural agility. The battle was brutal, each side giving no quarter. But the humans had something the Zypherians didn't: resilience. In the midst of the chaos, Alex pushed toward the artifact. It pulsed with an ominous rhythm, its surface covered in strange, shifting symbols. It was clearly alien, older than anything either species could have created. Elena followed closely, scanning the artifact with her portable analyzer. "It's a power source," she whispered, her eyes wide with awe and fear. "But it's more than that. It's a weapon. If they activate this thing, it could wipe out everything on this planet, including us." Alex didn't hesitate. "Then we shut it down." But before they could act, a towering figure stepped between them and the artifact. Commander Vrax, the Zypherian leader, was larger than any of the others, his bioluminescent skin glowing brighter in the artifact's light. His eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on Alex. "You cannot stop this, human," Vrax hissed. "This world will never belong to you." Alex raised his weapon, but Vrax didn't flinch. The Zypherian commander moved with terrifying speed, disarming Alex in a single fluid motion. The two clashed, their fight a blur of movement and energy. But Alex had faced worse on Xerion. He used his environment, his knowledge of Zypherian tactics, and sheer human determination to hold his ground. As they fought, Elena worked frantically on the artifact, trying to find a way to disable it. The battle raged around her, but her focus never wavered. Finally, with a triumphant cry, she found the weak point in its energy matrix. "Captain, now." she shouted. Alex saw his opening. With a final, desperate move, he drove Vrax back and grabbed his weapon. He fired at the artifact's core, the shot resonating with a deep, earth-shaking hum. The artifact's glow intensified, then shattered in a blinding explosion of light. When the dust settled, the outpost was silent. The artifact was destroyed, its power gone. The Zypherian forces, seeing their advantage lost, began to retreat. But Vrax remained, his eyes locked on Alex with a mix of rage and newfound respect. "This isn't over, human," he snarled. "You've won this battle, but Syrian will never be yours." Alex met his gaze, unflinching. "We're not here to take your world, Vrax. We're here to prove that we belong." With that, the Zypherian commander disappeared into the shadows, leaving Alex and his team standing victorious amidst the wreckage. Back at the camp, the crew celebrated their hard-earned victory. But Alex knew the war wasn't over. They had struck a blow, but the Zypherians would return, and next time, they would be even more dangerous. But for now, humanity had done the impossible. They had faced the planet's fiercest challenges and emerged stronger. They weren't just surviving on Syrian. They were thriving. The human spirit. The aftermath of the battle at the Zypherian outpost left the human camp in a state of cautious celebration. The artifact was destroyed, the Zypherian forces had retreated, and for the first time since landing on Syrian, humanity felt like they had gained the upper hand. But Captain Alex Carter knew better. Victories on a planet like Syrian were temporary. The planet itself was a living adversary, and now they had earned the ire of its most intelligent inhabitants. The Zypherians had underestimated humans. They had thought of them as weak, fragile beings from a soft world, incapable of enduring the horrors of Syrian. But humans were proving to be more than just survivors. They were relentless, adaptable, and perhaps most dangerously, united by an unbreakable spirit. The days following the battle were tense. The crew worked around the clock, repairing damages, fortifying their defenses, and preparing for what they knew would be the Zypherians' next move. But something unexpected happened. A message arrived. It was a simple transmission, encoded in a frequency the humans hadn't encountered before. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Commander Vrax, the Zypherian leader Alex had faced in the outpost. "Human," the message began, the tone sharp but lacking the venom it once held. "We underestimated you. You have proven more resilient than we expected. Meet me at the Valley of Echoes at dawn. We will talk." The crew was stunned. A parley from the Zypherians. It was unheard of. They were known for their ruthlessness, for their unwillingness to negotiate with any species they saw as inferior. But now, faced with humanity's stubborn defiance, they seemed to be reconsidering their stance. Alex knew it could be a trap, but he also knew it was an opportunity, not just to negotiate, but to understand. The Zypherians weren't just enemies, they were gatekeepers to Syrian secrets. If humanity wanted to thrive here, they needed to understand the enemy's fears, their motivations. At dawn, Alex set out with a small team, including Dr. Elena Reyes and Sergeant Marcus Hale. The Valley of Echoes was a desolate stretch of land, where the wind whispered through jagged rocks, creating eerie sounds that seemed almost like voices. The Zypherians were already there, their bioluminescent forms glowing faintly in the dim light. Vrax stood at the forefront, his tall figure casting a long shadow. There was a tense silence as the two sides faced each other, weapons holstered but hands ready. Finally, Vrax spoke. "Why do you persist, human?" he asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and frustration. "No species has ever survived here. Syrian is not a world for the weak." Alex stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We're not here because it's easy. We're here because it's hard. Because every time the universe tells us no, humanity answers with try us. You think this planet is unbeatable. We don't believe in unbeatable. We believe in adaptation, in perseverance. That's what makes us human." Vrax studied Alex for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke again, his tone softer but still laced with skepticism. Your kind is stubborn, but Syrian is more than storms and predators. It is a test of will, of spirit. Even we have lost many to its fury. What makes you think you are different? Alex smiled, not out of arrogance, but out of a deep, unwavering belief in his people. Because when we fall, we get back up. Every time. We learn, we grow, and we come back stronger. You've seen it. The storms didn't stop us. The Vorlax didn't stop us. You didn't stop us. And you won't. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The Zephyrians, for all their technological superiority and intimate knowledge of Syrian, had never encountered a species like humanity. Other species might have fled or perished, but humans thrived in adversity. It wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that they could belong. Vrax's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Alex thought the negotiation might end in violence. But then, something unexpected happened. Vrax nodded, a slow, almost reluctant gesture of respect. Perhaps we were wrong about you, he admitted. But not all of my people will accept this. There are those who see your presence as a threat to everything we hold sacred. Alex knew exactly who Vrax was talking about. General Kor, the hardliner Zephyrian who had opposed any form of negotiation from the start. Kor believed that the only solution was to eradicate the humans completely, and he was planning something big. Then help us stop him, Alex said. You've seen what we can do. Together, we can make this planet a place where both our species thrive. The offer hung in the air, a fragile thread of potential unity. Vrax didn't respond immediately, but Alex could see the conflict in his eyes. This was more than just a decision about survival. It was a decision about the future of both their species. After a long silence, Vrax finally spoke. I will speak to my people. But if Kor moves against you, it will be without my support. It wasn't a full alliance, but it was a start. The humans returned to their camp, knowing that the next few days would be critical. They had made an impression, but the real battle was still ahead. Back at the camp, the crew prepared for what they knew would be General Kor's next move. They fortified their defenses, but more importantly, they prepared their minds. Alex gathered his team and spoke to them, his voice carrying the weight of every challenge they had faced. They thought this planet would break us. They thought we'd give up, that we'd run. But look around. We're still here, stronger than ever. Syrian is more than a challenge. It's a chance to show what humanity is made of. And we are made of grit, of heart, of an unbreakable spirit. Whatever comes next, we face it together. And we will not fall. The crew erupted in cheers, their unity of force as powerful as any weapon. They knew the battle ahead would be the toughest yet, but they also knew something else. No matter how dark the path, humanity's spirit would light the way. The Zephyrians had started this war thinking they could break humanity, but they had only succeeded in waking a force they couldn't understand. The human spirit. The final battle. The fragile truce between the humans and Commander Vrax's Zephyrian faction hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Though Vrax had offered a glimmer of hope, Captain Alex Carter knew better than to believe the worst was over. The true threat loomed larger than ever. General Kor, a hardliner who viewed humanity's presence on Syrian as an unforgivable trespass. Kor was a zealot, driven not just by fear of humans, but by a fanatical belief that Syrian was sacred, a planet meant to belong to the Zephyrians alone. And Kor wasn't just planning another sabotage or ambush. He was preparing for total war. The first sign came in the form of a skyfire storm, a phenomenon where the atmosphere itself seemed to ignite with violent electric currents, tearing through the sky like veins of molten light. The humans had learned to predict these storms, but this one was different. The patterns were too perfect, too controlled. It wasn't a natural occurrence. Kor was using the planet itself as a weapon, manipulating its volatile environment through the remnants of the alien technology they had discovered in the outpost. As the sky burned, Alex gathered his crew in the command center. The camp's reinforced walls, once symbols of their resilience, now trembled under the pressure of a force they had never faced before. Dr. Elena Reyes was at the control console, her eyes scanning the data with growing concern. "It's not just a storm," she muttered, her voice tense. "He's destabilizing the entire region. If this continues, the magnetic fields will collapse. We're looking at a chain reaction, massive quakes, toxic gas eruptions, maybe even planetary collapse." Alex's jaw tightened. This wasn't just an attack on their camp. This was a threat to everything on Sirion, including the Zephyrians themselves. "We need to stop him," Alex said, his voice firm, "before he takes us all down with him." But stopping Kor wouldn't be easy. His forces were entrenched in a fortress deep within the Crimson Canyons, an area where the planet's natural defenses were at their most lethal. The canyons were known for their razor-sharp rock formations, shifting terrain, and frequent seismic activity. Navigating them was a death sentence for most, but the humans weren't most species. Alex devised a plan that was as daring as it was dangerous. They would launch a two-pronged assault. One team would disable the environmental control systems Kor was using to weaponize the planet, while the other would confront Kor directly. It was a gamble, but it was their only shot. Before they set out, a message arrived. It was from Commander Vrax. "I have convinced some of my warriors to stand down." Vrax's voice echoed through the comms. "But Kor's forces are loyal to him alone. If you face him, you do so without our aid. But know this, human, I believe in your strength. I believe in your people." It wasn't an alliance, but it was enough. As the humans prepared for battle, the camp buzzed with a tense energy. The crew had faced impossible odds before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving, once and for all, that humanity belonged on Sirion. At dawn, the team set out. The journey through the Crimson Canyons was a nightmare. The air shimmered with toxic heat, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the sky above crackled with unnatural lightning. But the humans pressed on, their resolve unshaken. Alex led the first team, Sergeant Marcus Hale, Dr. Elena Reyes, and a group of hardened soldiers. Their mission: infiltrate Kor's fortress and disable the environmental control systems. The second team, led by Lieutenant Sarah Quinn, would confront Kor directly, drawing his forces away from the control center. As they approached the fortress, the scale of Kor's operation became clear. The structure was massive, built into the side of the canyon, and fortified with alien technology. Zephyrian soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their weapons glowing with stolen energy. But the humans had one advantage: stealth. Using the canyon's natural cover, Alex's team moved undetected, slipping through the cracks and crevices until they reached the outer walls. Elena hacked into the fortress's security grid, disabling the sensors and opening a path into the heart of Kor's operations. Inside, the fortress was a labyrinth of glowing corridors and humming machinery. The alien technology pulsed with a life of its own, casting eerie shadows as the team navigated the twisting passages. The deeper they went, the more they realized the extent of Kor's madness. He wasn't just trying to kill the humans. He was willing to destroy everything to protect what he saw as Zephyrian purity. When they finally reached the control center, it was worse than they had imagined. Kor had amplified the alien artifact's energy, feeding it into the planet's core. If it wasn't stopped, Sirion would become a volatile death trap, uninhabitable for any life form. Elena worked quickly, her fingers flying over the alien console as she tried to disable the system. But Kor wasn't far behind. In the upper chambers of the fortress, Lieutenant Quinn and her team confronted Kor and his elite guards. The battle was brutal, a clash of raw power and unyielding determination. Kor fought like a creature possessed, his body enhanced by alien tech, his strength beyond anything the humans had faced before. But Quinn and her team fought with something stronger: the human spirit. As the battle raged above, Alex and Marcus defended Elena, holding off waves of Zephyrian soldiers while she worked. Time was running out. The planet itself seemed to pulse with anger, the ground shaking violently as Core's system pushed it closer to collapse. Finally, with a triumphant cry, Elena found the key. She disabled the control systems, severing the connection between the artifact and the planet's core. The fortress shuddered, the lights flickering as the artificial storms above began to dissipate. But it wasn't over. Core, sensing his plan's failure, abandoned the upper chambers and descended into the control center. His eyes burned with fury as he faced Alex once more. "You think you've won, human?" Core snarled, his voice a mix of rage and disbelief. "You don't belong here. Xerion will never be yours." Alex stood his ground, his weapon steady. "We're not here to take your world, Core. We're here to prove that we can stand beside it. And no amount of hatred can change that." The final confrontation was fierce. Core fought with the desperation of someone who had already lost everything. But Alex fought with the knowledge that humanity's future depended on this moment. It wasn't just about survival. It was about hope. In the end, it was Core's hatred that undid him. His single-minded focus blinded him to the teamwork and unity of the humans. While he targeted Alex, Marcus flanked him, delivering the final blow that sent Core crashing to the ground. With Core defeated and the control systems disabled, the fortress began to collapse. The humans fled, escaping just as the structure crumbled into the canyon below. When they returned to the camp, the crew was exhausted but victorious. The planet was no longer an enemy. It was a challenge they had faced and overcome. And as they looked out over the now peaceful horizon, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity wasn't just surviving on Xerion. They were thriving. A new dawn. The dust had barely settled over the ruins of General Core's fortress when the first rays of Xerion's twin suns pierced the toxic clouds. The light felt different this time, not just a fleeting break in the planet's perpetual hostility, but a symbol of something more profound. Humanity had faced the worst Xerion could offer: storms, monstrous creatures, sabotage, and war, and had come out stronger, more united, and more determined than ever. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about belonging. Captain Alex Carter stood at the edge of the human camp, his eyes scanning the horizon where the canyons met the sky. The camp itself was unrecognizable from what it had been just weeks ago. What had started as a fragile outpost was now a thriving settlement, fortified with Vorlak armor, powered by reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology, and self-sustaining with crops grown in the very soil that was once deemed inhospitable. But it wasn't just the structures or the technology that marked their success. It was the people. The crew had become more than just a team. They were a community. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers worked side by side, their differences melting away in the face of shared adversity. They weren't just surviving on Xerion. They were building a future. But the scars of their struggle were still fresh. The battle against Core had left its mark, not just on the land, but on their hearts. Lives had been lost, friendships tested, and the line between survival and annihilation had been razor-thin. Yet through it all, the human spirit had remained unbroken. A sudden hiss of static broke the morning silence, snapping Alex from his thoughts. The comm unit at his waist crackled to life, and a familiar voice came through. "Commander Vrax." Human. Vrax's voice was steady, but there was a new tone beneath the surface, something Alex hadn't heard before. "Respect. I wish to meet. There is much to discuss." Alex exchanged a glance with Dr. Elena Reyes and Sergeant Marcus Hale, who stood nearby. Both nodded. They knew this meeting could change everything. The Zephyrians had started this conflict as enemies, but there was now an opportunity to turn that hostility into understanding. The meeting was set at a neutral ground, a plateau overlooking both the human camp and the Zephyrian settlement. It was a place that offered no strategic advantage to either side, just open space under the twin suns. As Alex and his team approached, they saw Vrax and a group of Zephyrian warriors waiting, their bioluminescent skin glowing faintly in the morning light. But unlike before, there was no tension in the air. No weapons were drawn, no threats exchanged. For a long moment, there was only silence as the two leaders faced each other. "You have proven something I did not believe possible," Vrax began, his voice low but clear. "Your species. You endure. Xerion was meant to break you, to drive you away like all the others. But instead, you have tamed it. No, more than that. You have thrived." Alex nodded, his gaze unwavering. "We didn't come here to conquer, Vrax. We came to find a place among the stars, a place where we belong. And sometimes belonging means facing impossible odds and proving, not just to others, but to ourselves, that we deserve to be here." Vrax considered this, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Kor believed in purity, in isolation. He thought this planet could only belong to us. But I see now, Xerion belongs to those who respect it, who adapt to it. And your people have done just that. The words were simple, but their meaning ran deep. For the first time in Xerion's long, hostile history, two species stood on equal ground, not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners. The conversation turned from the past to the future. Vrax proposed a collaboration, an alliance that would benefit both species. The Zephyrians had knowledge of the planet's ancient secrets, its hidden resources, and its unpredictable environment. The humans brought innovation, resilience, and a perspective that saw challenges as opportunities. Together, they could achieve something neither had ever dreamed of, turning Xerion from a world of death into a beacon of hope. Back at the camp, the news of the alliance spread quickly. There was cautious optimism. After all, the Zephyrians had been their enemies just days ago. But there was also a deep understanding that this was the only way forward. Humanity had always thrived through connection, through building bridges where others saw walls. In the weeks that followed, the humans and Zephyrians worked side by side. Joint teams explored the uncharted regions of the planet, uncovering ancient alien relics and hidden ecosystems. They shared technology, blending Zephyrian energy manipulation with human engineering to create systems more efficient and sustainable than either could have achieved alone. The once hostile skies of Xerion began to clear, not just because of the environmental systems they stabilized, but because the weight of conflict had been lifted. Where there was once suspicion and fear, there was now curiosity and mutual respect. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of purple and gold, Alex stood atop the camp's watchtower, looking out over the settlement. Below, humans and Zephyrians shared meals, exchanged stories, and laughed together. It was a scene that, just weeks ago, would have been unimaginable. Elena joined him, her gaze following his. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" she said softly. Alex nodded. "We came here thinking we'd have to fight for every inch of ground. And we did. But we also learned that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won with weapons, but with understanding." She smiled. "We didn't just survive Xerion. We changed it. And it changed us." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Alex felt a deep sense of peace. Xerion had tested them in every possible way, physically, mentally, emotionally. But in the end, it had revealed the true strength of humanity, the ability to face the impossible and emerge not just alive, but better. This was more than just a story of survival. It was a story of transformation, of proving that even in the harshest environments, the human spirit could shine. Xerion had thought it could break them. But humans didn't just survive. They thrived.